Welcome to another episode of TERF Talk Down Under. I'm Stassja and with me is Ange. Hi, Ange.
Hi, Stas. Coming to you from my phone because the power's out here.
Yes. Well, where shall we start? Let's start with some good protest action happening around Australia in the last week.
Yep.
IWD Brisbane Meanjin held their regular no self-ID protest up in Brisbane, and there was a bit of drama this time around because they got attacked by some bougie feminist lesbians, I think, who that's what I heard. I could be wrong there, but they were attacked by women. Some woman came up and grabbed one of their signs and I don't know, destroyed it somehow. They're trying to track down who this was. They've made a police complaint for destruction of property. So that's disappointing.
Those protests are increasingly getting bigger numbers, so I'm not surprised that they're starting to meet a bit of opposition. So indirectly, it's possibly a good sign, hopefully. We'll take some good out of it.
And you said, I did get a message from Women's Action Alliance Canberra. They held a protest. Was it against that ridiculous magistrate Jane Campbell? Do you know?
Yeah, it was about the whole trans prison situation, and the leniency towards men who commit violence and then adopt a trans identity. So yeah, it was around that stuff.
So this was the magistrate who, like, the perpetrator was, he had 72 charges against him for sexually abusing his two little sisters over the course of however many years. And the magistrate said, a woman says, to my great astonishment, I find out that this trans woman might be held in a male prison. So I'm granting him bail so he doesn't have to go to a male prison. Absolutely disgusting. Well done, Women's Action Alliance Canberra. Thank you for organising that.
Not only have they taken to the streets, but they've released some wonderful resources for everybody to use, including pamphlets that you could hand out to people or to give to, childcare centres, schools, whatever. So look up Women's Action Alliance Canberra on Facebook and Twitter. Really good resources there.
Might link in the description to their resources. So all that happened. And then one of our friends here in Melbourne, she's a bass player, muso. She's out at the pub on Saturday night, just gone, and a trans-identified male. I think. Look, I'm going to try and get her on to explain the full story, but I think what happened, he walked up to her and shouldered her from behind. She's gone flying, and her shoulder is dislocated and fractured. She's in surgery today.
She was actually at the Punk Pub Crawl, which is a bit of a Melbourne institution. I used to attend it about 30 years ago. And it was usually, a bunch of leftists, goths, punks, anarchists, people who you would usually associate with being opposing to violence against women. And here we go. Like, these are
men.
These are these are men who claim to support women's rights and things like that, and here they are condoning male violence against women, and they consider themselves to be progressive and leftists, and they are not. I can't think of anything more establishment than supporting trans activism and supporting men being able to do whatever they like towards women. So it's despicable that nobody helped her to report him to the police or anything like that. They just went on with their day. Now I think they had a small interaction, and he waited until she turned her back to attack her. That's what a coward he is.
Absolutely appalling. I know she put in a police report against him. I'm pretty sure she's worked out his name and who he is. But
good.
Let's try and get her on when she's, you know, sufficiently recovered from the bloody surgery. And the awful thing about all of this is she's a bass player and she needs that shoulder just to play bass. So yes, we'll try and bring the full story in the coming weeks, get her on the show. It's just outrageous. What else has been happening? Some real high level bullshit from the ABC this week. My God, that I didn't even read this article, but I shared it on the Coalition Facebook page. It was about people who identify as mermaids. They fucking ran a story. The ABC, our taxpayer money, ran a story about, and the quote was, I'm not sure I feel like a creature, but I don't know whether I feel 100% human either. Like, it's embarrassing at this point.
Yeah, they won't run the issue of men in women's prisons or the impact of men on domestic violence services, but they will run a story about mermaid gender. It is absolutely ludicrous, and it's scary. You know, most people, they probably notice the absence of conversation around things like family violence and things like that because they're rarely talked about these days. And yet we have this influx of gender stuff. And I don't think Joe Public really realises what's going on. I don't think that they realise that it's been like this incremental takeover of all women's issues with this bullshit gender. It's crazy.
The other bullshit story they ran was about a female, a woman called who calls herself Z. That's her name. So she wants to play football. She's been playing on the women's team. But she thinks she's non-binary, and as part of her non-binary gender journey, she wants to take testosterone. And because it's considered doping, she might not be able to play on the women's team anymore. Like, it's like, ABC, fuck off with this shit and do some actual investigating. I'm so sick of it.
I think if you're going to, you know, identify out of your sex, you don't have the right to insist on being included in women's sport.
Yeah. and again, I don't understand why non-binary means that you have to look like a man by taking fucking testosterone. Like, oh my God. Okay, well, let's move on to the ABS, the Australian Bureau of Statistics. I was going to bring this story up last week, but we didn't get to it. A formal complaint, I'm reading this out. This was reported by Women's Agenda. A formal complaint has been lodged against former Assistant Treasurer, so Liberal Party guy, Michael Sukkar, and the Australian Bureau of Statistics over a failure to properly count LGBTIQ plus people and families in last year's statistics. So for those who don't remember, on last year's census, they had an option where you could select non-binary under sex. So it had female, male, and non-binary. If you ticked the non-binary option, you could then also select male or female. If you didn't select male or female, the ABS would randomly assign you either male or female. So, like, I think we can agree with the trans lobby that the ABS really fucking botched that question. Like, it's ridiculous. And then also, if you selected non-binary, there was a little text field where you could enter in whatever you wanted.
Gender.
Pardon?
Mermaid gender.
Yeah. Well, funny you should say that, because the ABS released a little update around this question. and basically found that the responses were useless. Only 0.17% of the Australian population ticked non-binary. And I actually think that that's quite useful, even though they've said they can't get any meaningful data out of this. I think that's really telling. We're talking about a tiny, tiny number of people in this country.
But see, I think, is that age specific? Is it the only counting the status of legal adults, or is it everyone in the household?
They didn't go into that. So
okay. Because I think a lot of the non-binary identifying people would be under the age of 18.
Yeah, true. So in their little report, they've said responses showed the concept of non-binary sex was not consistently understood. Duh, because it's not real, and was perceived in different ways by different people. So of the people who ticked non-binary, 1/3 of them then went on and filled in this little text box. And what they found was a bunch of weird terms like agender, demi-boy, gender fluid, even trans woman. And then they found 1 in 3 repeated the question response and wrote non-binary sex. A small number indicated a sexual orientation, including terms such as gay, lesbian, bisexual, and pansexual. So again, I think that's really informative. It says that there is a group of people in Australia that are confusing their sexual orientation with this bullshit gender identity.
Yeah.
And then a very small number indicated that they had a disorder of sexual development. So again, the conflation of intersex with non-binary, it's insane. All of it's insane.
And I don't know about anyone else, but I don't like the idea of the government keeping a record of my sexuality or my sexual preferences. It's none of their business. And it's, we live in a homophobic society still. It's a little bit more covert than it was 30 years ago, but it's still homophobic. And I would be worried about how that information could potentially be used against me.
I never considered that. So
things like child custody issues and things like that, your sexuality can be weaponized.
Yeah, I don't know. I think the ABS has got to be pretty tight with protecting the data from being.
So obvious.
I know, and then you see that happen. So yeah.
They can have my empty bank account details and my demerit points. Good luck, hackers. Yeah.
But look, I'm really shocked that about this formal complaint against the ABS and the Assistant Treasurer. It's going to a human rights tribunal, right? How
come their complaints get off the ground and ours don't? And ours concerning children and people with admitted, by their own admission, vulnerable mental health, and none of ours get off the ground, and this does.
Well, I'm not sure about any of ours that haven't got off the ground. I don't know if I think people need to start taking legal action here in Australia like they've done in the UK. I don't know what else is going to make things change. But there are two parties bringing this human rights complaint. One's a non-binary woman who's a lesbian who's claimed that her family, because they have 2 mums, were not properly represented in the questions, which isn't entirely true. I've sort of had emails back and forth with our friend Eileen up in Sydney, who did a lot of investigating and letters and submissions to the ABS around this stuff. And she said, well, no, it was like, if the other parent isn't the biological parent, which would be the case in a lesbian couple, it was accommodated in the questions. So it's going to be really interesting to see how that plays out. But you know, the fact that she's female and she calls herself mum, but she's non-binary, I think it's just infuriating. Anyway, and the other really in good news, Rachel Wong from Women's Forum Australia got a really good article in the Australian in the last, I think, was it yesterday or the day before? I can't remember. And hey,
day before. Yep.
Yeah, and also appeared on Sky News. So she's talking about the men in women's prisons situation here in Victoria. So well done, Rachel, and well done raising awareness. But what's coming up is the Victorian Equal Opportunity and Human Rights Commissioner, a woman called Ro Allen. She's a lesbian. She calls herself a walker. This is according to Wikipedia. So she's not just non-binary, she's a walker who walks between genders. She has a meeting coming up in October with the with Corrections Victoria, where she said she will raise the issues, particularly around the sex offender Lisa Jones being housed in Dame Phyllis Frost Centre.
That should be a conflict of interest, someone who who openly supports gender ideology, advocating probably for trans-identified males to be in women's prisons. That is a distinct conflict of interest.
Yeah.
Indifferent or, would be fine, but no, that's sending an activist into the fray. That's bad.
I agree 100%. I don't see how she's going to be impartial.
Yeah, I think there's going to have to be lots of letters written about that. Maybe we should just do a like a postcard type thing on the coalition, and people can just turn off an email or a letter just saying that's the wrong person to talk about this, or at least if they're going to include her, that they should include someone who has an opposing view that men shouldn't be allowed in women's prisons.
We'll see. I've spoken with Rachel Wong about this, and we're like, all right, let's give her the benefit of the doubt for now. Let's see what comes of this meeting, and we'll see.
Another one who people are giving the benefit of the doubt. Football grand final was last Sunday, and our Prime Minister Anthony Albanese was photographed with Danny Laidley, a trans-identified male who, as recently as 2 years ago, committed domestic violence offences and was charged with stalking and other things. And to see him post that photo, and all the newspapers post that photo everywhere, was a real kick in the face for victims of domestic violence. That is our Prime Minister, arguably one of the most powerful men in this country, standing there with the DV perp, and feels pretty hopeless here on the ground floor of this domestic violence movement, and of course I got on Twitter and I tagged White Ribbon and all the usual anti-domestic violence campaigners, and all of them were silent. None of them called him out. It was only women like us who said, this is offensive. How could you pose with this person? So,
I also wonder where's Grace Tame on that point.
Oh yeah, no, she's trans women are women. And we I lost respect for Grace when, women survivors, women like myself who are involved in crisis services, explained to her nicely that trans women are not women, and told their stories about how they had been impacted by this ideology. And Grace went on a rant about TERFs, and the next day she dogpiled on Kath Deves. So she's not listening. She claims to speak on behalf of survivors, but she's not listening to survivors. We don't want men in our crisis services. Mm-hmm. How would she feel if it was her perpetrator?
Exactly. Really disappointing.
Yeah. And so here in Australia, we don't have the other side speaking up. In the UK, they've got Posey. In the US, there's like a grassroots support. We have absolutely no one speaking up for us. Nobody, no academic, a couple of academics. There's really nobody who's a high-profile public figure who is speaking up against this ideology.
You just reminded me that there is a free event on next week at Melbourne University. There are a number of great speakers, pre-recorded presentations by Kathleen Stock and someone else from the UK, I can't remember. And it's all about comparing the Stonewall UK situation to the ACON Australia situation. So I'll post a link below if you're in Melbourne or nearby and want to come along to that. Me and Ange are going. There'll be a bunch of Melbourne TERFs there, so be a nice chance to meet up. And
one of the pulled out, the trans-identifying male speaker, Sally Hines, has pulled out, claiming that he didn't know that it was going to have TERF speakers.
How could you not know that? For fuck's sake.
See, they're so afraid of debate. And that's what we hopped on his Twitter and said, what are you so afraid of? It's not going to be, this is like a panel discussion. It's not even a debate.
Yeah.
So your views will be represented, they'll be protected. It won't be a hostile environment, but it's a chance for people to hear both sides for a change. Nah. And they back out. What are they trying to hide?
It's going to be an interesting one.
Yeah.
I imagine there is going to be some kind of trans activist protest out the front, if not inside the event.
That'll be interesting.
Yeah. Keep your phones recording.
Yep.
Okay, I'm going to bring our guest in today.
Oh,
yes, she's arrived. Today we have the lovely Kate, who runs Reasons to Riot on a popular feminist Facebook page on Facebook. So she's in or near Ballarat, and hello, welcome, Kate. So good to see you.
How are you?
Good.
Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yep. Thanks so much for coming on. We really appreciate it. Very excited to have you on. Now, for those who don't know, there is quite the LGBTQIA plus takeover of local city councils going on at the moment. It's certainly happened here in Victoria. There was a motion just passed by Marybeck, which is formerly called Moreland City Council. I was able to find out that, this particular council is filled with Greens Party members, Socialist Party members. They just passed this motion that implied that anyone opposing the inclusion of males in girls' and women's community sport is transphobic and transmisogynist. They actually used the word transmisogynist in a motion, an official motion. They are developing an LGBTQIA plus action plan that will, of course, cost money.
Yeah.
And they were also planning what looked like a very undemocratic consultation exclusively with an LGBTQIA plus reference group to the exclusion of all other ratepayers.
Yeah.
Now, something really similar is going down in Ballarat at the moment. So, Kate, tell us what you know.
Where to begin, you know? Found the TERF. Here I am. I was flagged as a TERF in Ballarat in 2016. And that sort of impacts my world. Ballarat is a small town. And when you're flagged as a TERF, you worry when you say what your name is, when you go places. It's so hard. Like the last week or so, I've sort of had this interaction with one of the Rainbow local government lobby group who are onto the councils and encouraging them to set up an advisory committee in order to put through the inclusion plan. And last year, when they announced that they were going to do that, I contacted the council and just let them know about the experiences of some lesbian women in our community in that we have been excluded as TERF on account of truly believing that lesbians are women, and to take that back, that lesbians are female, same-sex attracted, homosexual women, that this idea that you can engage in sex denialism when talking about a sexual orientation is really dodgy. And I think about the broader community and Ballarat and the sort of history that we have here and ideas about letting people speak. I feel like if they're pushing an ideology, and I don't think that a lot of people are aware that it is an ideology. I think that they think we want to be kind, we want to be inclusive, we want everyone to feel comfortable. And absolutely, you know, we want people to feel like they can express themselves like in a respectful way, but like express yourself however you will, whatever makes you feel comfortable. Like I was having lunch with our TERFs recently, and we were just talking about how we've changed our names over the lifespan. We've had, you know, different things. We've just, changed to be here, changed to be there. I used to be Kathy, I'm Catherine, I'm Kate now. And little things like that can make a massive difference to how you feel about yourself. So I totally understand dead naming. Someone calls me Kathy now, I don't like it, don't call me Kathy, which is fine. And I think that most people are accepting of people's expression and just want everyone to feel comfortable with themselves. But what they're actually pushing is an ideology that requires a belief set that I don't think everyone's on board with. Now, I moved up here to go to the university, and I did philosophy, you know, and for someone like me, I've always been someone who feels a lot. I feel a lot. I can't always articulate what it is that I feel. So for me, things like consciousness raising and doing philosophy to help me understand the beliefs I hold that inform my thinking, it makes you more aware of what's going on. And I think that there's a lack of analysis. Like we had the Courier is our local paper, and they had an article a while ago just promoting all the funding that's coming this way for LGBTIQA plus youth, millions of dollars to set up hubs. Now, when I think about young people, I'm quite aware of like how we develop our brains over time. And until you're 25, you really don't have that capacity always to be able to make informed decisions and consider consequences and do that sort of level of thinking that adults do. And I feel like what's happening here is that there's a lot of juvenile thinking that we think we want everyone to be included, we want diversity for sure, but we haven't thought about the implications of that. And what is being pushed here is very much a belief. When I was told in a lesbian group or a women-loving women group that if I didn't believe actually believe that trans women are female, are actually female, then I couldn't be in the group.
Yeah.
And because I believe that female is your sex, and I don't know, it's that lack of analysis. Like, so I was saying there was an article in the Courier, and it was about all this funding coming through, and they featured 4 young women in this article, and 4 young women who identified as gender diverse with non-binary or they, them. And I'm a bit of an activist with my chalk, love my chalk. And I went to Michaela Settle Labor's office because she has a lot of trans posters and things on her office windows. And I went to Catherine King in the Courier and the ABC, and I chalked, why does she identify as they and them and he and him? Like, we're not allowed to speak about it. We're not allowed to analyse this cultural phenomenon that's happening. I think it's really important that we do understand why our young girls doing this. Like, I have members of my family who, you know, are going this way as well. I think most of us are now starting to be touched by this ideology and struggling with it a bit, and more than anything, struggling because we're not allowed to talk about it, you know, not allowed to talk about it. So in 2020, we did the talk about it for the first time, and that was in response to women being kicked off social media for talking about women's rights. And anything that you say about women and women's bodies, and we are always embodied female, it's not something that we can avoid, and that's how we are different to the default male. We did the talk about it was to go out and write on the ground what concerns you, really pro-women. I don't like to police women with their voices. If women want to be angry about it, do that, but it's public space, you know, so blah, blah. Nina Fennell contacted me after that, who was with Grace Tame and did the Let Her Speak type thing, and she contacted me and said, I love what you've done here. This is amazing. She saw some photos that I shared, and she wanted to write a paragraph about it in an article that she was doing. And I let her know that I had been branded a TERF and that any association with TERF can get you into trouble. I mean, that is the nature of it now. So I let her know that, you know, it is a great idea. Let women speak, but be warned. And that was the end of that. You know, it really is a tricky thing that it's like, let women speak, but not like that. Mm-hmm. You know, don't let women speak about that. And so it's been really frustrating with this council thing. Like, I've stuck my head up with the council a bit. I went and saw one of the councillors who was involved with a couple of events that I helped put on, like the Reclaim the Night, did that for a few years, and also got it back on the calendar here in Ballarat because we hadn't done it for 14 years. And when Jill Mayer was killed, I sort of contacted the council and said, why don't we do a march? And it happened, and it was good. And then I ended up picking that up with my TERF friends, because when I was labelled a TERF in a feminist group that had come out of the university, and it was set in the university because one of the women had been sexually assaulted on a field trip with the uni, and she wasn't happy with the way that the university had handled that and wanted support. So we set up this feminist group, and then we got kicked out by the uni because we challenged them about their personal hygiene notices in the ladies' toilets, you know, get fresh down there. And we sort of pushed back on that, and then the uni said that they didn't really want us saying that we were associated. So we went public and invited people in, and we did an event, vigil, and that was 2016, a lot of sort of members of the public joined that group. And then I was shunned there for saying that lesbians were female, same-sex attracted homosexual women, and it was by a community member whose father had transitioned, and she was saying that, no, he was a lesbian. Mm-hmm. And there was this pile-on in a group that I helped set up. And I really got shunned in that. But a number of women contacted me by private messaging. And that was 2016. We've been meeting up most weeks ever since. It's lovely. You know, it's really nice to have women where you can say, let her speak, where you can say how you feel, what's happening, not just about this issue, but just women supporting women. You know, it's a brilliant thing. We've done events and put on a self-defense class for women. We've done the Women's March, but didn't engage with like the March for Justice that happened here. When that first hit, it was going to be the Women's March. Yeah, and I put my hand up tentatively to say, yeah, I would love to be involved in helping with this. And I don't know if you were in that space when that happened, but within 24, 48 hours, it went from the Women's March to the March for Justice, and we lost the word woman because it was considered transphobic.
Yeah, that was outrageous. I've been dying to get someone on who was, I know a couple of women that were quite involved with the March for Justice, who got really burnt, like badly burnt by the whole thing. And it's now become, they've raised a hell of a lot of money and no one seems to know what's happening with the money. And I've got two women that know like heaps of details, but they're both, you know, involved in, you know, running support groups for women who are victims of violence and stuff like that. And they don't want to jeopardize those positions that they have. So then they can't speak publicly. It's insane.
Yeah, don't speak like that. Let her speak, but not like that. You're not allowed to talk about what's happening. And so there's this whole underground, and I think that's something with this LGBTIQA, is that lesbians notice it first, and that's what we're seeing in other countries. It's the lesbians like Magda and Burns and so on who are speaking out saying, well, this is actually impacting us because we're quite used to having female-only spaces. Things like this, like it's acutely felt when if you're a lesbian, you're not necessarily dealing a lot with men. And now more and more women are being impacted by it, by things like the March for Justice. When it was the Women's March, that went off. Like overnight, thousands and thousands of women were like, yes, this is what we've been waiting for. Let's take it to the streets. We're angry. We want to speak up. And then like just boom, the admin came in. It was a trans-identifying male, just knocked so many women out of that space. And it's like, and I would like to think that there were a lot of women who maybe didn't say anything then, but saw what was happening. And I know that a lot of, like I've sort of made contact with a lot of women from that as well, because they were kicked out too, and they were like, what the fuck was that? You know, how did that happen? How did it go from being a women's thing to now that's transphobic and trans women are women? Was like for days. It was the whole thing became trans women are women, and you had to accept the ideology or get out. And I feel like with this thing hitting Ballarat now, a lot of people don't understand that if you don't accept the ideology and it's coming to your workplace or whatever, and if you're not on board with that, then it's going to make the workplace uncomfortable. And we hear that, you know, we share spaces, we listen to women's voices who are in workplaces where they don't feel like they can say anything. This whole idea that women can't say anything is like, if that's not a red flag, I don't know what is. I was having a bit of mental health care last year because life and menopause and all that, and just dealing with a parent, child, trying to help. And I was, I think it was after bloody Roe versus Wade went through, and I had a session. I was really angry that day after they changed it. And I was talking to this woman, and she was a wonderful therapist. And I was really angry and saying, you know, women really matter, and how we define women, and that women have words and things that they can use to describe their lives and their experiences as embodied female really matters. And she was a bit shifty and stuff. And I said, well, what would you do if a woman came in to see you and her husband has transitioned and she's been left in his wake? You know, how do you deal with that? And she said it had never even crossed her mind about the woman on the other side of that equation. And she said afterwards, you know, she really appreciated having that conversation with me, and because she knew that she couldn't talk to her colleagues about that.
Wow. Wow. That's terrifying. Yeah.
We were using a whiteboard that day, so I picked up the pen and said, do you mind? And I wrote on the board, if you know that there are things that you cannot say pertaining to women's lives, and you know that you're not allowed to say it for fear of trouble, then that is a red flag. And I wrote it on the board, and we walked out and it was still on the board when we left. It was like, you know, like, hello, can we get beyond the juvenile reactionary, yes, let's be kind, to the point where we care, where we actually care? Because I think I watched that March for Justice event from Ballarat again yesterday and listened to what people were saying. And the intent of that event for most people was that we listen to women and we listen to survivors, and that we allow them a space to speak about their experience and what will help them and what matters. And just being female, that really matters. Like, that's stuff that matters. That we can all try and do a they, them, non-binary, but still how we are recognised in the world. Like, if you have to tell someone, I don't know, I feel like there's someone in town who really doesn't like me, and she's the reason I got kicked out of a group after one event. And she's really into this sort of dogma that I don't know, I don't want to. It's just really hard. It's really hard to when you know you're not supposed to say anything, but you're going to go mental if you don't. And it's just like, this is coming. Like, this is here now in Ballarat. We have women are harassed at public events if they're a known TERF by people who have a lot of control, who are on the advisory committee. They're backed by, like you say, the Greens, like this Sean Mulcahy guy. I'm like, fucking God. Like, he's just, the gaslighting is insane. It's just...
Well, tell us, let's back up a little bit. Tell us about what's happening at Ballarat City Council, and then let's go on to talk, if you can tell us about what this Sean guy, because we know he's worked with Amy Challinor in the UK to like get all this pro-LGBT stuff through local councils and the Greens over there in the UK. But what's happening in Ballarat? Where are they up to?
So we've just finished the consultation process. They do have public consultation, and 5 of us went to the consultation, and there were 4 different plans. There's an intercultural plan, aging well, disability access and inclusion, and the LGBTIQA plan. And 5 of us went along, and look, straight up, I had gone to see in person one of the councillors who's feminist, who's been involved with events before, and just explained that what was happening with lesbians, blah, blah. And then we get this plan, and it's got all the definitions, right, of what the terms that they're using when they're pushing this plan. And a lesbian, according to this, is a term that refers to an individual who identifies as a woman and is sexually or romantically attracted to other people who identify as women. So I was just like, oh, fuck, really? Are we doing this? No. So we went along to the thing. The consultation process is finished. Letters have been written. I have alerted the council to the fact that I felt I contacted Sean on the day of the info session. And I just said, oh, you're going to, get other councils to push this idea that lesbians can be, male, rah, rah, rah. And it went off. And so they've finished the consultation. I've heard back. And Sean was just, I've made malicious attacks on people in Ballarat. Malicious attacks. Do you even know who I am? So where the consultation has finished, people have written letters. We've got letters back to say, yep, we're going to take all the information on board. The end of the month, end of next month, they will make public the revised plan, and then take it from there. They're going to have a meeting on the 26th of October. Now, I believe in the revised plan, they're just dropping the definitions.
They're
still going to push this. They're still pushing the ideology, but they're going to drop the definition so that anyone can question what it is that they're pushing.
So they're just going to leave the definition section out completely.
Sounds like that, because it feels like gaslighting. Definitions and just not have it in the plan, but they're still going to go ahead. Well, I mean, who knows? But I don't really trust that like they say that there are priority groups that they have consulted with, and then it was open to the public but like, honestly, we let them know last year, and the response I got when I let them know last year that I was worried about this advisory committee was, and I sort of framed it around Lesbian Day of Visibility and how they had done nothing. All of the regular people who would post, all your Greens people who would post about all their special days, did nothing again for Lesbian Day of Visibility. So they said, I got a phone call. I spoke with Sean Mulcahy back then, and the inclusion officer at Ballarat, and it was all about, well, do you want to fly a flag? But it's not allowed to be political. And I was just like, well, it kind of is political, because when you're talking to women, the personal is political. Like, this is our lives, it's political. And I wasn't well at the time. I didn't go ahead. Like, a lot of women supported and said, look, we'll give you the money to get the flag, because you have to source your own. Could have gone ahead, didn't. And then anyway, Sean Mulcahy's just been after me for days. And then he's like, oh, you hate this gender ideology. Is that why you didn't want to do the flag? And I was like, mate, do you really think it's a flag? Do you think it's flying a flag that's actually what matters to women's lives? Like, this whole plan, like, they're going to just fly flags, and it just feels like a lot of virtue signalling. But I think also it's just going to make people feel uncomfortable to speak their minds.
Yeah. Go for it, Ange.
I was after I saw Sean's behaviour on Twitter, I was concerned that my local council was going to adopt similar policies. So I asked at a council meeting the other night where they were getting their diversity and inclusion training and how much money was spent on it. Now, they haven't actually had diversity inclusion training, but altogether, including people from other cultures, elderly people, other minorities, it's $40,000 a year, and a proportion of that is for the LGBTIQ plus community. What concerned me is that they said that they haven't had the diversity inclusion training yet, but they have already been instructed to welcome non-binary people on the phone line when you ring up, men, women and non-binary people. So that's already been introduced at Yarra Ranges Council. And the other thing is that they're having a progress flag raising ceremony. So someone is within the council pushing for this stuff already, even though there supposedly hasn't been any outside agency come in to promote gender ideology. So now my next task is to find out who is pushing this, and also ask for the, $8 something or other of my rates that are going towards this flag. But anyway, it was good to see this all unfold on Twitter, Kate, because then it gave me an incentive to go and ask my own council. And I think that we need to do that, because as ratepayers, we have a right to know where our money is going, and also a right to not have our council represent an ideology that we may not necessarily agree with.
I think that's the thing. It's like if it was just trans and gender diverse people, just, you know, we're just not discriminating against, then that's like obviously, like who wants to be part of that or see that happening, you know? But I think it's just this idea that trans women are women, and it's never so much about trans men, like the female who are, you know, trans and gender diverse. It really is that you must adopt this idea that males can be now included into the category of woman. And I think a lot of people don't understand that it really runs deep, this idea that you have to actually believe that. And it's, we have secular, you know, we have between government and the people, we're not having church, like study Scott Morrison got hassled because of his religious beliefs. This, it feels like a belief that you have to adopt. And it's, nobody, like people don't find out until it's a bit late. And then you see, like when we started, I was thinking, oh, I found the TERF. Do you remember, like a few years ago, if you even commented in a space, people would just go, oh, found the TERF, and that was the end of it. You get piled on, all your comments would be removed, the conversation would stop or whatever. And now we're seeing more people saying, well, you know, I don't mean to be transphobic, but I think that having males in women's sport or males in, there's inclusion, when they're saying that inclusion actually means to include males in women's prisons, women's sports, in women's spaces. Oh, actually, there is a problem with that, but we're not transphobic. We don't want to harass trans people, but we understand. It's like we don't think that every male is a violent male, but we have protections in place because we know that some men are. It's not all men. It's some men, and women need protection from that. And I feel like it's the same with this. It's not all trans, and it's not all trans-identifying males, but there are males who are trans-identifying who may well be problematic. And we had that Paulie Johnson talking about sex offenders in the LGBTIQA. I don't feel comfortable including the I because they keep asking not to be included, but we have to be. But yeah, like Paulie Johnson was talking about how Vic Pol was saying to him, you know, you need to include these male sex offenders into those spaces. And Paulie was speaking out and saying that these women who you call TERFs, who have concerns about this, actually are right to have concerns. And I know because I'm in this space. And now he's been fined. I mean, he's removed the videos that he had up. Like, I think that we should be allowed to be careful as well as be kind. And when you stop at just, oh, you have to be kind, it's really...
Be a doormat.
It's like you have to be caring.
Yeah. Kate, I'm just going to go through this. Sorry? You can't hear me? Testing, 2, 2. Can you hear me, Ange?
Yeah, I can hear you both.
Oh, dear. You're
not on mute?
No, I'm definitely not on mute.
Right, I'm back.
You can hear us? Okay. So at the moment, there are city council elections coming up in Tasmania, and Equality Tasmania has sent out this survey. I don't know how many candidates they've sent it out to, but they've definitely hit up Hobart City Council. And it essentially reads like a wish list. This is what they want implemented. So let's do a comparison. I'll go through them one by one, and you tell me if this is what is in that action plan that Ballarat has come up with. So would you support the following initiative in your local council? 1, flying rainbow/pride flags in your local area.
For sure.
I'm astounded that that's first on the list. Like, what the... Anyway.
Everywhere here, you go to the library, there's the pride, the militant pride flag and the trans flag. Massive.
Here too.
In the library.
Passing motions to support LGBT plus equality. Well, we definitely saw Marybeck City Council just do that. Setting up, well, Ballarat's already done this, setting up LGBT plus advisory groups.
Yeah.
Adopting LGBT plus action plans. Well, that's what Ballarat's in the middle of right at the moment, yeah?
Yep.
Ensuring services are LGBT plus inclusive.
You can't go to a service and not see as you walk in the -18 sticker, which just sets me on edge already, because the guy who founded that was a pedophile. I can't believe that this stuff just goes unchecked. And when people say, or hang about, there's people involved who are a bit dodgy, and they're trying to remove the boundaries between adults and children and spaces and sorry.
You're right. Training staff about the needs of LGBT plus residents and visitors. Seeking rainbow tick accreditation or similar, which could mean ACON, for LGBT plus inclusion. This is the one that pisses me off the most, making gender neutral toilets and change rooms available at all public and sporting facilities. I mean,
some of us have still got women only, like women only. Good, whatever.
Yeah. Look, the thing with this, and did you guys both see the Primark viral TikTok video this week? So young woman, she's in tears. She's like, I've just come out of Primark. I had a terrible experience. I had men walk in on me when I was trying on clothes. So apparently, she wasn't actually semi-naked when they walked in, but it was just this violation. And the way she started the video, that she's like, oh, I'm really happy that we have gender neutral unisex spaces so that everyone feels inclusive. However, I've just been fucking violated. Yeah. It was just sad.
Yeah. Look, we have only unisex toilets around here in all the public parks, because the state government has demanded that if you are to have your toilets replaced in a public sporting ground or park, it has to be replaced with unisex toilets. So they knocked down, a toilet block with 3 men's toilets and 3 women's toilets, and they replace it with 2 to 4 unisex toilets.
Yeah.
And I'm had so many conversations with women or dads with little kids who refuse to use the unisex facilities because they're disgusting, 2, because of lack of privacy, because you're on the toilet and there's people of the opposite sex standing just outside listening to you, and they all go home to go to the toilet. Oh, wow. So I've had so many conversations with everyday people about this, because I actually asked my council about that too. Why are all the toilets, the single-sex toilets, disappearing and being replaced? It is the Victorian state government Labor initiative. You only get your money if you put up unisex toilets. And that saves them money because they don't have to make 6 new toilets. They're only making 2 or 4. And they just change the sign and stuff us.
Yeah.
It's just such a failure to think. Like, we know, like, the rate of women who have been sexually assaulted throughout the lifespan, like, it's pretty high. Like, a lot of women do have a story, like, do have scars around sexual violence and stuff, who really want to have spaces where they can feel safe. And there's a lot of talk about making the LGBTIQA plus safe, but women's safety is just being thrown out. Like, you're not even allowed to talk about it without saying, oh my God, I really care about trans people. However, this has just happened to me. Like, you have to sort of frame it about, like, I'm not a horrible person. It's just that this happened to me, and it's, and I feel bad, and this is happening to other women. Like, it's just a ridiculous state of affairs that we can't just say, no, actually, women need these spaces, so we're going to ensure that these spaces exist. And that's okay for us to say that without having to, like, cotton wool it around the most vulnerable. And can I just say something that really just blew my mind and really upset me a lot with this Sean business on Twitter. And I didn't know about Sean and Amy Challoner. I didn't know that Sean's partner was on our advisory committee. I only knew that Sean was doing the local government lobby group. Now I can't bloody remember what I was going to say.
I know.
Well, yeah, it's gone. It was a good one. So I just ramble. Sorry.
You're right. I'll just read out the last. Oh, yeah, go.
So after we'd spoken, this thing on Twitter went for days and days. There was so much support.
Still going.
It's still going. And Sean just going, no, well, trans women are lesbians, blah, 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 blah. No. And so anyway, this has gone on and on and on, and Sean's saying that I have maliciously attacked people, that I'm so horrible, blah, 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 that people don't want me around because I make others feel uncomfortable. And then Jay, his partner, posted to the rainbow community that there are women in Ballarat who hate them.
Yeah.
Most vulnerable people. There's people who we say they're suicidal, they're really delicate, and we have to make it all safe. Like, if that's not just political and a power-hungry move to tell people that these women hate them.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sorry, but isn't that a tactic that the Nazis used to turn the public against Jewish people? Right? It's fucking insane.
See, we're a bunch of articulate, outspoken white women, of a certain age. Imagine all the women out there, and we can't get a voice. We're not represented by anyone. We're here in the dark trenches of YouTube and on online spaces. But the people who make the decisions aren't listening to us. Can you imagine being disabled, elderly, from a non-English speaking background, Indigenous? Those women have even less voice than us, and these are the women that I'm thinking about all the time.
Mm-hmm.
If we can't get a word in, where are they represented? Who's listening to them? Absolutely nobody.
That's right. Ladies, we've just hit an hour, so we're going to have to wrap it up there. Kate, thank you so much for coming on. It's been a real pleasure.
Oh, have I gone?
No?
Oh. Can I just say one thing?
Absolutely.
Last weekend of October, I think we're going to do the Talk About It again. It's normally the weekend where we do Reclaim the Night, but we haven't been doing that because of COVID. But that last weekend in October, get your chalk out, find a place, a park, somewhere, say something about why women matter, That's hopefully, it'll be picked up globally again.
Yep. Remind us and we will advertise it here on the show. All right. Thank you to all our subscribers. If you haven't already subscribed, please do. Please like it. Oh, Kate's gone. I was going to keep her on anyway. All right. And any last bits and bobs from you, Ange?
No, I'm good.
All right, cool.
Fighting a good fight, everybody.
Yeah. We'll see you again next week. Bye, everyone.